In a quiet suburban neighborhood on a bright autumn afternoon, the sound of police sirens pierced through the peaceful streets. Officer Thompson, a veteran cop known for his questionable tactics and implicit biases, noticed a sleek black BMW with tinted windows rolling through a stop sign. Without hesitation, he flipped on his lights, already forming assumptions about the driver. Little did he know, behind the wheel sat Special Agent Michael Richardson, a decorated FBI agent with 15 years of experience in counterterrorism. He'd just wrapped up a long day of field work and was heading home to his family. As he pulled over, Richardson took a deep breath, all too familiar with situations like these despite his badge and credentials. The dash cam footage would later reveal what happened next, a tense encounter that would spark nationwide conversations about law enforcement, racial profiling, and the complex dynamics of power and prejudice in America. Officer Thompson approached the vehicle with his hand resting on his holster, a detail that wouldn't go unnoticed in the viral video that would soon circulate across social media. "License and registration," Thompson demanded, his tone carrying an edge that made his preconceptions clear. As Richardson reached for his glove compartment, he moved with deliberate slowness, aware of how crucial these next few moments would be. But before he could grab his documents, he noticed Officer Thompson's grip tightening on his weapon. "Sir, I'm going to reach for my credentials now," Richardson announced calmly, drawing from years of de-escalation training. "But before I do, there's something you should know." The tension in the air was palpable as Officer Thompson stood there, his body language revealing his internal struggle between authority and uncertainty. What happened in the next few minutes would not only change both men's lives forever, but would also become a powerful testament to the importance of accountability and understanding in law enforcement. As Richardson's FBI badge caught the afternoon sunlight, Officer Thompson's face transformed, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and something deeper beginning to surface. But this wasn't just another viral video of a traffic stop gone wrong. The encounter would spark an unexpected chain of events that would ripple through their department, their community, and eventually, the entire nation. The dashcam footage captured a raw, unfiltered moment that forced everyone who watched it to confront their own biases and assumptions. As Richardson sat in his car, his heart racing despite years of field experience, he made a decision that would transform this routine traffic stop into something much more significant. Instead of filing a complaint or letting anger take over, he chose a different path, one that would challenge both men to look beyond their badges and see each other as human beings. Officer Thompson's next move would surprise everyone who later watched the footage. His response to discovering Richardson's true identity wasn't what anyone expected, especially Richardson himself. The conversation that followed would become a powerful example of what can happen when two people, despite their differences and initial prejudices, choose to listen and learn from each other. This story isn't just about a traffic stop gone wrong or right. It's about what happens when our preconceptions collide with reality. It's about the choices we make in those crucial moments when our beliefs are challenged, and how those choices can either divide us further or bring us together in unexpected ways. What happened next would not only challenge both men's perspectives, but would also inspire a movement within their community. As tensions rose and cameras rolled, neither man knew they were about to become part of a story that would change countless lives, including their own. But before we reveal what happened next, let's take a closer look at the events that led to this life-changing encounter. The story began hours earlier when Special Agent Richardson had just closed a major case involving cybersecurity threats to national infrastructure. His team's success should have been cause for celebration, but his mind was already focused on making it home in time for his daughter's piano recital. He promised he wouldn't miss this one, not after being called away during her last performance. Meanwhile, Officer Thompson was nearing the end of a particularly frustrating week. Budget cuts had hit the department hard, leading to longer shifts and mounting pressure from above to increase citation numbers. His 20 years on the force had left him hardened, perhaps too quick to judge, too ready to see threats where there were none. His fellow officers had noticed the change in him over the years, but few dared to address it. As Richardson and Thompson stood there on that suburban street, their paths crossing by chance, Neither man could have predicted how their encounter would reshape the conversation about policing in America. The dashcam continued recording as Richardson, still maintaining his professional composure, slowly presented his FBI credentials. "Officer," he said, his voice steady and clear, "I understand you're doing your job, but I'd like to discuss why you really pulled me over today." The words hung in the air like morning fog, heavy with unspoken meaning. Officer Thompson's hand finally dropped from his holster, but his posture remained rigid. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement as nearby residents began to notice the scene unfolding on their usually quiet street. Some reached for their phones, sensing the weight of the moment. What happened next caught the attention of everyone watching. Instead of escalating the situation or immediately backing down, Officer Thompson did something unexpected. He took a step back, adjusted his body camera, and asked a question that would later be replayed thousands of times across social media. "Sir, would you be willing to have an honest conversation about this? Right here, right now?" Richardson, surprised by the shift in tone, realized this could be more than just another tense traffic stop. Drawing from his FBI training in human behavior, he recognized something in Thompson's voice, a crack in the armor, a moment of genuine reflection. The agent glanced at his watch, thinking about his daughter's recital, but knowing this moment deserved his full attention. As the two men began to talk, neither noticed the small crowd gathering at a respectful distance. Among them was Sarah Chen, a local journalism student who'd been working on a documentary about community policing. Her camera captured what the dashcam couldn't: the subtle changes in body language, the gradual lowering of defenses, the moment when confrontation began to transform into conversation. But beneath the surface of this seemingly civil exchange, deeper currents were moving. Officer Thompson's body camera was still recording, documenting every word, every gesture. Back at the station, his supervisor was already receiving alerts about the stop, standard procedure when pulling over federal agents. And in Richardson's pocket, his phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from his FBI team, wondering about his delayed arrival at his daughter's school. The tension from the initial encounter hadn't disappeared. It had merely evolved into something more complex. As both men stood there, each carrying the weight of their badges, their experiences, and their responsibilities, they were about to discover that this traffic stop would test more than just their patience. It would challenge everything they thought they knew about justice, judgment, and the power of honest dialogue. The neighborhood watched in silence as Officer Thompson reached for his radio, but what he said next would set in motion a chain of events that nobody could have anticipated. Officer Thompson's voice cracked slightly as he spoke into his radio. "Dispatch, I need you to clear my schedule for the next hour." The unusual request drew curious glances from the gathered onlookers. He then turned to Richardson and said, "Agent, if you're willing, I'd like to show you something at the station. It might help explain, well, a lot of things." Richardson checked his phone one more time. Another missed call from his wife about the recital. With a heavy sigh, he made a quick call. "Honey, I'm going to be late. Something important came up. Something that might actually make a difference." The disappointment in his daughter's voice when his wife passed on the message weighed heavily on his heart, but his instincts told him this moment mattered. At the police station, the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows as Thompson led Richardson to a small conference room, away from the curious eyes of other officers. On the table lay a stack of personnel files, performance reviews, and citizen complaints. Thompson's hands trembled slightly as he opened the first folder. "Last month," Thompson began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I pulled over a young man. Nothing serious, just a broken taillight. But I handled it badly, really badly." He pushed forward a bodycam footage report, his eyes fixed on the table. "I saw what I wanted to see, not what was actually there. The kid was just trying to reach for his registration, but His voice trailed off. Richardson leaned forward, his FBI training kicking in as he studied both the documents and the man in front of him. The statistics told a story, a pattern of escalating incidents, but also something else, something that most people might miss. Between the lines of official reports and formal reprimands, he saw a veteran officer grappling with his own demons. Outside the conference room, word had spread about the unusual meeting. Officers gathered in small groups, whispering among themselves. Sarah Chin, the journalism student who had followed them to the station, sat in the lobby, her camera in her lap, sensing she was witnessing something unprecedented. As Thompson continued sharing his story, a call came in over the station's radio, a situation developing across town that would soon test both men's commitment to the conversation they'd started. The dispatcher's voice echoed through the hallways, describing a scene that made both men's heads snap up in attention. Richardson's phone buzzed again, this time with an urgent message from his FBI office about the same situation. He and Thompson locked eyes, suddenly realizing they were about to face a choice that would define not just their careers, but their legacy in law enforcement. The tension in the room shifted from personal to professional in an instant. Both men stood up, their earlier confrontation temporarily forgotten in the face of a greater challenge. But as they moved toward the door, Thompson hesitated, his hand on the doorknob. "Agent Richardson," he said, turning back. "Before we head out there, there's something else you need to know. Something about today's traffic stop that I haven't told you yet." The words seemed to catch in his throat as the station's emergency lights began to flash, casting alternating patterns of red and blue across their faces. Richardson's hand instinctively moved toward his badge as the gravity of Thompson's tone registered. Whatever was coming next would change everything, not just for them, but for every officer and agent who would hear this story. The truth hanging unspoken between them was about to collide with the chaos unfolding across town. Before Thompson could reveal his secret, dispatch cut through the tension with urgent news. The developing situation across town involved Officer Thompson's son, a rookie cop who had just radioed for backup during what should have been a routine patrol. The color drained from Thompson's face as he listened to the details crackling over the radio. Richardson's FBI instincts kicked into high gear as he processed the dispatcher's words. The situation involved an armed suspect who had taken hostages at a local community center, the same center where his daughter's piano recital was taking place. The personal stakes for both men had just skyrocketed beyond anything they could have imagined. "My son's been tracking a corruption case within the department," Thompson admitted, his voice shaking. "He wasn't supposed to be on patrol today. He was supposed to be meeting with internal affairs." The implications hung heavy in the air as Richardson quickly pieced together the connections. This wasn't just coincidence. The traffic stop, the corruption investigation, and the hostage situation were somehow intertwined. Sarah Chen, still waiting in the lobby, overheard fragments of radio chatter that made her journalist instincts tingle. She'd been investigating suspicious patterns in local police funding for her documentary, and suddenly everything started clicking into place. As she watched Thompson and Richardson rush toward their vehicles, she made a bold decision to follow the story. Racing through the streets with sirens blaring, Thompson finally revealed what he'd been about to say back at the station. "That traffic stop today, it wasn't random. I recognized your car from a surveillance photo in my son's investigation files. Someone wanted us to meet, someone who knew what was going to happen today." Richardson gripped the dashboard as they swerved through traffic, his mind racing. His phone lit up with a text from his wife. "Michael, there are men here. They're not letting anyone leave. They're asking for you by name." His personal and professional worlds were colliding in a way he'd never imagined possible. As they approached the community center, they could see Thompson's son, Officer David Thompson, maintaining a perimeter. The young officer's face showed relief at seeing his father, but his eyes held a warning. "Dad, you can't be here," he called out. "You're part of why they're doing this." The hostage negotiator once seen approached with news that made everyone's blood run cold. The suspects were demanding two things: all evidence from Officer David Thompson's corruption investigation, and a face-to-face meeting with both Senior Officer Thompson and Special Agent Richardson. Sarah Chen, who had managed to arrive at the scene, captured the moment when Richardson and Thompson exchanged knowing looks. They both realized they were standing at the center of something much bigger than a traffic stop gone wrong or a simple corruption case. This was about systemic issues that had been brewing for years, and somehow they'd both been unknowingly playing their parts. As SWAT teams took their positions and the FBI's hostage rescue team arrived on scene, Richardson's phone buzzed one final time. The message he received made him freeze. It was from an unknown number, containing a single photo that connected everything: the traffic stop, the corruption case, and the current hostage situation. But what the photo revealed would force both men to make impossible choices in the next few minutes. The photo on Richardson's phone showed a high-ranking police official shaking hands with a known crime boss, dated just 3 days ago. But what made Richardson's heart stop was the familiar figure in the background. Himself, at a crime scene he thought was unrelated. They had all been played, masterfully positioned like pieces on a chessboard. Without hesitation, Richardson shared the photo with both Thompsons. "This isn't about corruption," he said urgently. "It's about next week's federal task force announcement. They're trying to prevent it by discrediting everyone involved." The realization hit Officer Thompson like a physical blow. His own recent aggressive behavior hadn't just been about pressure or bias. He'd been subtly manipulated by department leadership to create incidents that would undermine the task force's formation. Inside the community center, Richardson's daughter had managed to secretly text him the exact location of the hostage takers. She'd been practicing piano when everything started, and now her vantage point near the stage gave her a clear view of their positions. Her years of growing up with an FBI agent father had taught her well. Sarah Chen, meanwhile, had discovered something crucial in her research. The community center's security system was linked to the same private security firm mentioned in Officer David Thompson's corruption investigation. Through her laptop, she could access the building's internal cameras, footage that wasn't available to the police or FBI. As SWAT prepared to breach, Richardson and both Thompsons watched Chen's laptop in astonishment. The footage revealed that the supposed hostage takers were actually undercover officers from a neighboring district, forced to participate in this elaborate scheme. They were being blackmailed with evidence from falsified internal affairs investigations. Richardson made a bold decision. He grabbed the megaphone and addressed the hostage takers directly. "Detective Martinez, Officer Chen, I know who you are and why you're here. We have proof of the blackmail. You don't have to go through with this." His words echoed across the tense scene, causing visible confusion among the SWAT team. Inside, the undercover officers realized their cover was blown, but in a way that offered them an escape. They had a choice: continue with a plan they never believed in, or help expose the true corruption. The next 60 seconds would determine everyone's fate. Officer Thompson, seeing a chance for redemption, stepped forward with his son's evidence file in hand. "I'm not just turning over the evidence," he announced clearly. "I'm testifying about everything, including my own misconduct and how it was encouraged by leadership." His son stood beside him, holding up his phone showing a live stream of the entire scene that was already going viral. The standoff ended not with a bang, but with an unprecedented show of unity. The undercover officers laid down their weapons, the hostages were released, and Richardson's daughter ran into his arms, still clutching her piano sheet music. But as reporters swarmed the scene, Sarah Chen noticed something on her laptop that no one else had caught: a glimpse of a figure slipping away through the building's basement, carrying a briefcase. The figure was the police department's internal affairs director, the one person who was supposed to be investigating corruption, now fleeing with what could only be more evidence. Richardson and Thompson locked eyes once more, this time as allies. The day's events had exposed one layer of corruption, but they had also uncovered something bigger: a network that reached far beyond their city limits. As Richardson's daughter finally got to perform her piano piece, right there in the parking lot, on a keyboard brought out by one of the officers, Thompson turned to Richardson and said, "That traffic stop. It might have been the best mistake I ever made." The crowd that gathered to watch the impromptu performance didn't realize they were witnessing not just the end of one story, but the beginning of another. In the days that followed, the story of the traffic stop that uncovered a web of corruption became national news. Richardson and both Thompsons testified before a federal grand jury, their combined evidence exposing decades of systematic manipulation within multiple police departments. But it was the personal transformations, not the headlines, that left the most lasting impact. Officer Thompson's dashboard camera footage from that initial traffic stop went viral for an unexpected reason. It didn't show another confrontation between law enforcement and a black citizen. Instead, it captured the moment two men chose to look past their assumptions and listen to each other. Police academies across the country began using it in their training programs, not as an example of what went wrong, but as proof of what could go right. Sarah Chen's documentary evolved into something much bigger than her original thesis. She captured the whole story, from the tense moments of the traffic stop to the piano recital in the parking lot. Her film, titled The Traffic Stop, won several awards and sparked nationwide conversations about police reform, accountability, and the power of human connection. The federal task force not only moved forward, but expanded its scope. With Richardson and both Thompsons as key advisors, it became a model for building trust between law enforcement agencies and the communities they serve. Officer David Thompson was promoted to lead a new internal affairs division, one with real power to investigate and prevent corruption. The internal affairs director who fled was eventually caught in a small town near the Canadian border. The briefcase he carried contained evidence that led to indictments of corrupt officials in 3 states. But more importantly, it provided proof that change was possible when good people refused to look the other way. Richardson's daughter's piano piece became an unexpected symbol of hope. She composed a new song called Sirens to Symphony, which she performed at police academy graduations and community events. The melody somehow captured both the tension of that day and the harmony that followed. Officer Thompson underwent a profound personal transformation. He started a mentorship program for veteran officers, helping them recognize and overcome their biases. His honest acknowledgement of his past mistakes earned him respect from both his colleagues and the community. Sometimes, he often said, it takes getting pulled over by your own conscience to realize you're heading in the wrong direction. 1 year later, at a ceremony honoring officers who had shown exceptional commitment to community policing, Richardson and Thompson stood side by side. As they shared their story one more time, Thompson revealed something he'd never told anyone. That day, when I first saw the FBI credentials, I almost walked away, but something in Agent Richardson's eyes, the same patience and determination I now see in every officer who goes through our new training program, made me stay and listen. Sarah Chen's camera captured the moment they shook hands on stage, but it was what happened afterward that truly showed how far things had come. Their families had dinner together, with Richardson's daughter and Thompson's son swapping stories about growing up in law enforcement families. The piano and the police badge, once symbols of their differences, had become bridges to understanding. The story didn't end with exposed corruption or policy changes. It ended with 2 men from different worlds discovering that the shortest distance between fear and understanding is an honest conversation. As Richardson often reminded his FBI trainees, sometimes the most important backup you can have is the courage to listen. The traffic stop that started it all became more than just a viral video or a case study. It became a reminder that even in our most divided moments, there's always a choice: to escalate or to elevate, to confront or to connect, to fear or to understand. And sometimes, the most powerful change starts with a simple decision to see beyond our badges to our shared humanity.